What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video, and today it's the Game Week 13 preview. Lots of topics to go through. Last few weeks we've been talking about, should we get Diogo Jota in? Will he get enough minutes? Now he's out for 6 to 8 weeks and we're talking about his best replacements. Spurs players have come up again. Christmas planning. There's loads of stuff to go through. I'm going to jump into it in just a second. Please do hit that like button if you've enjoyed it. I'm trying to turn the content around as quickly as possible ahead of tomorrow's deadline, and hit that subscribe button and the notification bell because there's loads more to come before the deadline tomorrow and then for the rest of the week as well. Let's jump into the first topic and let's talk about Diogo Jota. So forget bringing him in now. It's all about taking Diogo Jota out and who to get instead. Now, Klopp has said he's out for 1 to 2 months, but the thing is, over Christmas especially, there's a lot of game weeks to come, right? So he is going to miss a lot, probably 6 to 8 game weeks at least, probably more. Definitely time to get rid. I will just quickly say, as a kind of side note, with him out, it does make Mane and Salah's minutes more secure. Now, I wasn't particularly worried anyway, but obviously with Jota there, he did have someone he could bring in to maybe give Mane and Salah an additional rest that they might not usually have got. That's not going to happen now, right? Origi and Shaqiri, and when they're fit, and players like that can come in, but I wouldn't be surprised if Mane and Salah start pretty much every single game now over the Christmas period. At best, maybe being bench once. So that's kind of one upside, I guess, to Jota being injured. But obviously, for those of you that have got him, like me, it's certainly time for him to go. So it's difficult to give like a whole blanket answer about who should be brought in, because some people have money in the bank. Some people are looking to make 2 transfers to get in a big hit. Some want to go right down in price. Some want to stay around the same price, right? So I'll try and give a few different options. So for me, for example, Jota is like my 8th attacker. So I can just put him down to like a bench fodder option, right? Because I can just use my other 7 attackers instead. I don't need to worry about him. So if that's something you're looking to do as well, I'm probably going to bring in Souček. At the same price, you've got Lookman as well, both at 5 million, both probably good options. I had a look earlier for a Fantasy Football Scout video over the last 6 game weeks for those two. Very similar numbers in terms of shots in the box. Lookman is creating more chances though, and his overall expected goal involvement is slightly higher. So he actually looks like slightly better option, but fixtures-wise, Fulham next 3 are okay. No, they're pretty good to be fair, actually. They're a bit more than okay. They're decent. But after that, they're pretty tricky, whereas West Ham's are kind of good all the way from now up until like game week 19-20. So Souček, if you're just going to put him on the bench, slightly wins out for me. If I had to play them every single week, I might actually look at Lookman instead. And then if you go to kind of 7 million or below, there's a few more options there. So I think Bowen, again, talking about West Ham, is a really good option. 0.41 expected goal involvement per 90 minutes so far. He's decent, right? The likes of Calvert-Lewin probably be around, usually last season they were on like 0.5, slightly higher this season, but 0.41 for someone like Bowen, I think it's around the 6.3 million mark, is decent. Last 6 games he's created 12 chances, he had 18 shots, 12 of them in the box as well. So he's getting forward, his goal threat's good, his creativity is good as well. So Bowen around the same price is someone that I would like in. He's probably my number 1 pick around that price. You got Podence and Neto, but I'm just not a fan of Wolves' short-term fixtures, so I wouldn't necessarily be looking there. Although I do think they're obviously quality players, and Wolves are a quality team, but I'd want them after the fixtures are done. Maddison did well against Brighton, but as someone that owned him, I think last year or even the season before, he does sometimes go on these runs of just picking up points for like 5 to 6 weeks in a row, and then just suddenly goes off it. But I'm just not sure I would go there right now, unless his fixtures are going to turn soon as well. I think if you didn't have him for those 2 goals last night, just forget about him for me. And then otherwise it's players like Ward-Prowse, Mason Mount, and I wouldn't be going there. I've spoken about Ward-Prowse before. I think a lot of his points are coming from set pieces. Not a bad thing, but you want some open play threat as well, I would say. And Rafinha I've spoken about before. He was on the watch list last week, 5.4. He's a good option for Leeds, I would say. So, you know, if you're going up in prices, loads of premiums to talk about. De Bruyne, Salah, Fernandes, still my top 3. We're going to talk about Spurs players in a minute. So there's loads of options you could go for. Fulham as well. Fulham attackers are very cheap, and they're looking like they're improving a little bit. I'm going to talk about Fulham a little bit later in the video as well. But I think around the same price, Bowen is probably my favourite pick. But if you're going down to a bench fodder option, then it's Souček or Lookman for me. Okay, so Chelsea defence is an odd one, but there's a few different kind of questions that are coming in. One, should I get off the double up? Should I downgrade Chilwell is another one as well. So I'm going to try and cover it all in this little bit. Ultimately, I know they didn't get a clean sheet against Everton, but I don't think they're a side we should start worrying about when it comes to defensive returns. They're still a very, very good side. We've already seen them get a couple of clean sheets against Spurs, Man United already. And even if I look at the stats for the last 6 game weeks instead of the whole season, they're still the best for expected goals conceded, as they are for the whole season as well. So there's not really too much to be concerned about. And I don't want to look any more short term like the last 2 game weeks, because it's just not big enough of a sample size. So in terms of swapping Chilwell, because obviously he is the most expensive, to Zouma or Reece James, I don't particularly have any issue if anyone wanted to do that. Obviously it's your team, but you know what I mean. I don't have an issue even necessarily doing it myself, but only if I needed the money that week, right? If I've got 1 free transfer this week and I'm doing Chilwell to James for some money for a future transfer, I would rather just save the transfer and have 2 transfers the next week. And maybe your transfer plans will change. Maybe you're suddenly thinking, right, I don't need to deal with Chilwell now. I've got other things to worry about. Or maybe you do. And then maybe you get the money and you buy the more expensive player in a different position, whether it's another defender, midfielder or forward or whatever like that. So I do think there's merit from going to Chilwell down to James, because it's nearly $1 million saving depending on when you got him. If you picked up Chilwell at 5.5, then it's not as big an issue. But if you picked him up at like closer to 6, or even if you bought him recently at 6.1, 6.2, then the drop to Reece James is quite a lot, and it's worth looking at. So I've had a look at some of the stats for the last 6 game weeks. So chances created, 6 for Reece James, 4 for Chilwell, 2 for Zouma. And I've included Zouma because everyone always complains that I forget about him. Shots, James has had 10 shots, but only 2 in the box. Chilwell's had 6, all of them in the box. And Zouma's had 4, also all in the box. And then expected goal involvement, so expected assists plus expected goals, 1.37 for James, 0.89 for Chilwell, and 0.58 for Zouma. Now, one of the reasons to buy Chilwell back when we first started buying him was he was absolutely nailed on. Reece James had been rotated a couple of times with Azpilicueta, but at this point, I think Reece James only missed 2 Premier League games out of 12. And therefore, I think we consider him pretty much as nailed on. I still think there's probably a slightly bigger risk that Azpilicueta comes in for him than any of like Emerson or Alonso coming in for Chilwell. But at this point, it's worth the decrease in money. So if I was buying a Chelsea defender now, I wouldn't go for Chilwell. James looks as attacking, if not a little bit more, and he's cheaper. So he'd be the one I would go for. But like I said just a minute ago, I wouldn't necessarily make the swap until I needed the money. Zouma, still a good option, and he came close as well against Everton again. Like he's just ridiculous in terms of goal threat. But overall attacking potential, I do think you're more likely to get a return, not necessarily a goal, but a return from the other ones, right? So again, Chilwell, Zouma, and James all looking good, and I think Reece James is probably the one that I would target right now. In terms of fixtures, I think on paper they don't look great, but Wolves away, West Ham at home, Arsenal away, Villa at home, not bad for defensive returns. So if I was on a double up, I wouldn't necessarily be looking to get rid. And if I had one, it wouldn't necessarily put me off the double up either. It's probably not the right time to jump on, like as in prioritising that over other transfers, but I do think the fixtures are pretty decent. So despite no clean sheet against Everton, they got one against United, they got one against Spurs, they're not suddenly a bad attacking team. If you're on the double up, just keep it, especially if it's like Chilwell and James or James and Zouma. It's really good value, especially if you jumped on early, and it's not really anything to start worrying about. So in terms of downgrading, yes, you could do it, but I don't think there's a rush to do it at all. So it feels like we've been talking about dropping Spurs players for about the last 6 to 7 game weeks, or at least I have. The questions are still coming in. Should we get rid of him? Is this the right week to do it? Who should we keep? Etc, etc. And I think this is probably the last time we're going to, unless anything major changes, like someone gets injured, it's probably going to be the last time we do it, because this is probably their last really tough fixture for a good few weeks now. And I would say, right, when you talk about getting rid of a player, it's usually for a tough run of fixtures, not just for any given game. So you could ask this after every game. Should I get rid for this game? Should I get rid for this game? Like, I first started talking about it before Man City and Chelsea, but obviously if you kept after those two, there was no real need to get rid before Arsenal and Palace, as shown. And so now it's a whole different conversation because they got Liverpool away coming up. And I think at this point, if you've held on to them, there's probably less of a reason to get rid, because the amount of tough fixtures they've got left is now decreased. After Liverpool away, it's Leicester at home, then it's Wolves away, I believe. And then they've got a really good set of fixtures from game week 16 to 19 that includes Fulham, Aston Villa, Sheffield United. So it's a decent little run, and probably, you know, not as strong a reason to get rid now. And like, some people will turn around and say, or I've seen the comments say, you got it wrong, stupid, you were dumb to get rid. But I think you have to look at who was brought in instead. Like for me, I dropped Kane 3 weeks ago, and I got Salah instead, who's outscored him. I also got Bamford up front, who's got an assist last week and a goal the week before. So he's done all right as well. So getting rid of Kane, obviously, yes, I would rather had Salah, Bamford and Kane. But in my team structure, I could only have one or the other. And I chose Salah, and he has done better. So getting rid of Kane wasn't dumb. Yes, I could have maybe gone a better way about it, but that's just hindsight talking. I made the decision based on the fixtures, and it worked out. I kept Son, right? I got a bit lucky with the Villa postponement, but I kept saying, like, maybe Son, Arsenal, Crystal Palace will outscore Fernandes with West Ham and Man City. Now, in the end, Fernandes missed 45 minutes from the West Ham game, which kind of skewed it a little bit. But that was okay. And now I'm again looking to get rid of Son this week because I think for the next couple of weeks, Fernandes will score more points, right? So that's what you're doing. You're just betting on a different player scoring more points. Nothing has changed. It wasn't stupid to get rid of Spurs players, but in some teams it's worked out well. In other teams it hasn't. Like if you got rid of Kane and Son and you didn't go for the likes of Salah and De Bruyne, maybe it was for Vardy. And again, up until this week, it wasn't looking like a great move, but now it was. You can't evaluate it after just 1 week. It's got to be over a stretch of a few weeks. And so far, after 3 weeks, getting in Salah has worked for me. Maybe that will be different this week. Maybe it'll be different next week. But right now, it went okay. Whether or not you should still get rid of them, like I said, it depends who else you haven't got, right? I've seen some teams with De Bruyne, Fernandes, Kane and Salah. At that point, there's no need to get rid of Kane. You've already got the 3 premium players you're going to need for captaincy. And if you get to game week 16 and you want to captain Kane, then absolutely job done. Now, if you're asking me over the next 3 weeks, where Spurs have Liverpool, Leicester, Wolves, versus De Bruyne, who starts with West Brom, and Salah, who's also a really good captain, who's going to score more points? I'm still siding with those boys over Kane. The difference might be minimal. It might only be 3, 4, 5, 6 points, but I still think they're going to score more. So if you're asking me whether to transfer out Kane for one of them, I probably still would do it. But as I say, the longer you leave that decision, the more likelihood is you're just going to keep Kane because the fixtures are going to get good again soon. So if you don't get rid of him for Liverpool, you probably just want to keep him, right? If you took out Kane to Vardy, for example, swapping that back in game week 14 looks like a good move. You skip the Liverpool game and then you get Kane back in when he plays Leicester at home and he is a better bet than Vardy. So again, there's no right or wrong answer here, and I'm not going to necessarily keep talking about it. If you want to drop them for different premiums because you think they'll score more, that's absolutely fine. That's the whole point of FPL. If you want to keep them because they've carried on doing well and they carry on scoring points, then keep them. I would say for like Son, for me, one of the reasons I'm going to drop him is he's only had 1 shot in the box over the last 4 game weeks. It's absolutely insane how little he's had shots in the box. He's still scored twice. Don't get me wrong, he's a great finisher. But I just wonder at some point, is that going to decrease? Is the amount of points he's going to get going to decrease a little bit? And like I said, I'm making the move to go for Fernandes instead. So that's something to consider about. I do think if I was keeping one or the other, right, and money is an issue, right? Everyone always says, forget about the money, who would you keep, right? Money is always an issue. You can always use that at some point down the line. But I do think Kane is the better option. He's more involved. He's getting more shots in the box away. He's got penalties. So I do think he is the better option over Son. I've said that loads of times over the last few weeks. If I was going to captain one, it would always be Kane over Son. And I think, therefore, I would always keep Kane over Son. I think the Liverpool game is interesting. I think Liverpool are going to attack like Man City did, and that could spell problems because Spurs will be able to counter them at times. And that is basically how they won the game against City. They're going to defend deep. Whether or not Liverpool will be able to break through early on, that might change the game. And we saw when Crystal Palace scored, the Spurs then went on the attack. Leicester and Wolves is going to be a little bit more difficult because you wouldn't expect them to attack so much. And we could just see Spurs sitting deep again. So I think if they keep on playing how they have done the last few game weeks, at some point we might see the goals dry up a little bit. But the thing is, when they do score, these two are involved, right? So their goal involvement is huge. And therefore, if you see Spurs as a team are going to keep scoring, then these two are going to keep scoring as well. So maybe for your team, there's no need to get rid. So no right or wrong. I've already got rid of Kane, and it did okay for me. I got Salah in. I'm going to get rid of Son for Fernandes. Hopefully that works out as well. Could I have kept both and got bigger green arrows? Potentially. But then you're just talking hindsight, like I said, about making the exact right move every week. And that, unless you're going to win the whole thing, which is very unlikely, I guess, in the grand scheme of things, it's difficult to do. And so you've just got to bet on what you think is right. And for me, it's removing them now. But for you, it might not be. So I was a little bit surprised about the number of questions I got about Lamptey, but then I checked his ownership, it's 11%. So I guess 700,000 plus managers own him, so it probably makes sense that there was quite a few questions. And obviously he missed the Leicester game, so people wondering where he is. Would he start the next game against Fulham and then Sheffield United? So Manager Potter said that it was precautionary. So the quote that Brighton put out on Twitter was, "It's a shame we haven't got Tariq Lamptey, but that is purely precautionary. We have a lot of games coming up, so we have to be careful with the players." We've seen Potter do this before, resting key players for difficult games where maybe Brighton aren't favourites to win, to then be ready for the easier games. So he kind of targets the ones where he thinks he can get the points. It doesn't always happen, right? These players like Lamptey, Morpay, etc., Trossard will play the majority of games, but we have seen him at times like this rest before. And also, Lamptey has had a few issues early on where he kept coming off early for a few games because of hamstring precautions. Now, I don't know if it's a hamstring injury this time as well, but we have seen that, right? The way he bombs up and down the pitch is probably not that coincidental that sometimes they need to take these precautions. So he should be okay. I'm not particularly worried about him ahead of Fulham away and Sheffield United at home. I'm going to talk about Fulham a little bit more, about whether that is a good fixture still in a little bit when I talk about Fulham. But I've seen a lot of stuff on Twitter about Lamptey, about, I don't know, you find sometimes, I guess people like me are talking about him, joking around that he's going to get an 18-pointer, but ultimately he is just a squad player that costs less than 5 million. I'm not expecting the world from him. I think it's probably worth remembering you don't have to play him every week, but there are some players that aren't too much more expensive that probably are massive upgrades. So Reece James, for example, is one that springs to mind. Like, I can sell Lamptey for 4.7 million, and Reece James is only 0.6 million more, so I get a Chelsea defender who's also very attacking. He probably is a better bet. John Stones is 4.8 million. If I can sell Lamptey for 4.7, that's 0.1 million to get a Man City defender. Obviously, there's risks with that, whether he'll keep his place, will Laporte come in at any time. But right now, John Stones started 3 in a row at 4.8 million. He also looks very good. So I don't think like Lamptey is this player that you have to have in your squad or that you can't sell him. He's just a squad player that's okay to have. I looked at his goal threat. So he's 16th for expected goal involvement for the whole season. So not really up there with the rest of the defenders, but obviously that's including everyone, right? So Chilwell, Reece James, Robertson, Trent, etc., who are a lot more money. He is a lot cheaper. Brighton's defensive stats are still pretty good, but Matt Ryan in particular has not really covered himself in glory, and that's probably where a lot of the clean sheets are being lost. So I don't really see any reason that you have to massively sell him, but there's also not a massive reason to keep him either. I think Fulham away and Sheffield United is okay fixtures to play him in if you need to. If not, you just put him on your bench as normal. If I was going for someone else, it'd probably be Dallas or Ayling at Leeds, but I know a lot of people won't like that because of their defensive performances. Or Soufa at West Ham are probably your best bet for replacement if you can't go up in price to the players that I've already mentioned. So if you're a Lamptey owner, don't panic too much. He should be back for the next game, and obviously Sheffield United at home after that. I mean, I don't want to risk saying this, but that is pretty much almost a banker of a clean sheet, right? It might not happen now, but it looks pretty good for a clean sheet when any team plays Sheffield United. So next couple of fixtures are good. But of course, if you've got a bit of money up to upgrade him, there's absolutely no harm in doing that either. So every single season, in the run-up to December, we start talking about the Christmas period, how many games there are, rotation and stuff like that. And now we're here, right? Game week 13 deadline is on Tuesday, 4:30. So tomorrow, if you're watching this on Monday. And then game week 17 deadline is just 17 days later. So we're going to get game week 13, 14, 15, 16, and then 17 in 17 days apart. So there's a lot of football to come, a lot of game weeks, a lot of deadlines, and potentially some rotation. But the broken record that I am, every single season for people that have been watching my videos since the start, rotation gets overblown. When I first started playing FPL, maybe there was a little bit more than there is now. But in the last kind of 3 to 4 seasons, we have not seen as much rotation as we talk about, right? And FPL Manager will always speculate and try and plan ahead, and it makes sense to do that. But rotation is not that bad. Will Man City players rotate? Absolutely. They do that anyway. Will the likes of Mane, Salah, Fernandes rotate loads now all of a sudden? No, absolutely not. And obviously the Jota situation for Mane and Salah has helped out there as well. For the core players, like the ones I've just mentioned, plus like De Bruyne and players like that, I'd be very surprised if they get benched more than once over the next 4 to 5 game weeks. Could they get benched once? Absolutely, right? There is a lot of games to come. Sometimes there's only like 2 to 3 days break. You play a game, there's 2 to 3 days break, and you play another game. So that is something to be concerned about. But I think it's more likely they get their minutes managed than they don't start like 2 or more times, right? So you can see like Bruno Fernandes, Sheffield United, maybe if Man United are up like 1, 2-0, maybe even 3-0, fingers crossed. Then he gets brought off around 60, 70 minutes, has a bit of a break, then plays the next game. That's the kind of thing that I would see. This season's a little bit different, of course, because pre-season, we talked about this a lot, it wasn't a proper pre-season. COVID and stuff has affected some players' training and stuff like that. So maybe it will be a bit different, but it's not something that's really making me worry or change my strategy too much. Because the main question that comes out of this from people is, should I spend my transfers on my first 11 or should I improve my bench? See that question every single season. And for me, it's always the first 11. That's where you're going to get the most amount of your points from. Should you have a strong bench? As strong as you can at all times, not just at Christmas, right? A strong bench is not just for Christmas. And so you're still not going to spend like loads of extra money. If you've got a playing goalkeeper, fair enough. If you don't, fair enough. Then you've got £4.5 million defenders. There's not really any £4 million playing ones at the moment. You've got maybe £4.5 to £5 million midfielders. And that's it. No one's really, for the most part, spending more than that. We are in a situation now where you could spread money around a bit. If you only had 2 or 3 premiums, plus Bamford, Calvert-Lewin, Watkins, Antonio Wilson up front, then it does leave you a bit of money to have an 8th attacker. And fair enough, if that fits in with your strategy, you're happy with that, then do it. But if I had like an injury or a player I really wanted to get rid of in my first 11 and someone I really wanted to bring in, I would definitely prioritise that over a bench transfer, especially if you're literally making a transfer for a player to then sit on your bench even that week, right? If you're, I don't know, let's say someone gets injured. Let's say Bruno Fernandes gets a bit of a knock and Solskjaer says, yeah, he's going to be out for the next week, but he'll be back for the game after. Then, yeah, okay, maybe in that scenario, you upgrade your bench player or you get in a playing bench player for that 1 week who you can then stick back on the bench the week after. That's a little bit different. But most of the time, I'm still prioritising my first 11. There are slight differences for me this year. Like, for example, I'm probably going to make a move this week where I get Souček in for 5 million. Usually, I don't spend that much on my bench shot. I'd usually spend like 4.3 to 4.5 million. But just in case I do need someone, he is a better option than those at 4.5 million. So that's a slight change, but I wouldn't be spending too much more than that because every kind of 0.5 million you take out of your first 11 to spend on your bench is probably less points. And I still think over Christmas, the chance of needing all 3 of your bench players more than once, even more than twice, is so unlikely. So yes, plan for Christmas. Yes, there will be some rotation, unless the manager says something like Hasenhüttl was pretty good last year. But most managers are not going to tell you when players are missing out. So I wouldn't really rely on that too much. I would just plan ahead, get the same players in you always would for these good fixtures, whoever that might be, and try and have a playing bench, but you don't need to put too much money on there, in my opinion. So as we saw against Liverpool, there probably has been some improvements at Fulham. I thought they played really well. In the first half, they created a good few chances, caused Liverpool problems. And if it wasn't for Alisson, right, pulling out some really good saves, Fulham should have been kind of more than one up. And in the second half, they probably attacked a little bit less. They definitely had much less of the ball in the second half. At least that's what it felt like watching it. But they defended and held their shape really well. And Liverpool struggled to break them down. I do think kind of Henderson having to go back to centre-back didn't help too much. But overall, I was quite impressed with Fulham. And some people did mention it before the Liverpool game that they were looking improved, and fair enough. But I think it's dangerous maybe to change your opinion too quickly of a team based on a couple of fixtures. And also, Man City put 2 past them, and they should have put more past them. So to say that, you know, captain Liverpool player was a bad choice, I would massively disagree with, no matter how much Fulham maybe look like they've improved. So I thought, to kind of test it, I would check out some of the numbers, right? I think from looking at them, yes, you can see there is some improvement. I wanted to look at the numbers to see if that backs it up as well. So I looked at the last 6 game weeks, which stretches back to their clean sheet against West Brom. I will caveat this by saying that the last 4 fixtures have been tough. So Everton, Leicester, Man City and Liverpool. So all I'm about to talk about is always worth caveating with the fixtures they've played. But also, that makes it more difficult to kind of know whether they really have turned much of a corner. I think the next 3 fixtures are, they include Brighton, Newcastle and Southampton. That's probably a better test of how good they now maybe are. So expected goals conceded for the season, they're the 3rd worst. I talked about that last week. Narrowing it down a bit, last 6 game weeks they're the 6th worst team, so some improvement there, but not by much. And then the last 4 they're the 2nd worst team, but again, fixtures have been pretty difficult. When you play Man City and Liverpool, no one's defensive numbers are that good after that. And then if I looked at the attacking stats, so in terms of the whole season, they're the 12th best for expected goals. So they're not even that bad anyway, right, for the whole season. 7th best for the last 6. So some improvement there. And 9th best for the last 4. So even though they've played Everton, Leicester, Liverpool, Man City, they're better for expected goals than they are for the whole season. So there has been some improvement. I do think taking out the likes of Mitrovic has really helped with their attack. It's a bit more mobile. Like Mitrovic is more of like a target man. He's going to be in the box waiting for headers. But that's just one way of playing. It feels like now they've got a few more strings to their bow. So I think looking at the numbers, I think it's probably too early to say they're now a team that you shouldn't back against for goals, right? Yes, they kept a clean sheet against West Brom, but since then they've still conceded 8 goals in the next 5 games. So they're not necessarily out of the water when it comes to defensive performance, but the attack has improved quite a bit, and they do now have options. And like I said, the fixtures coming up, Brighton at home, they just can't seem to keep a clean sheet. We're going to talk about Lamptey. Newcastle away, Southampton at home are all good. And then they've got Spurs, Burnley, Man United and Chelsea after that. So short-term fixtures pretty good, long-term fixtures not so good, which is what is putting me off kind of going for them ahead of maybe like a Souček or someone like that instead. But they do have options now. Cavallero, 5.3 million, playing as a forward, listed as a midfielder, and on penalties. He's had 8 shots in the box in the last 4. Not many other players beats that. You got Lookman, who's 5 million, and De Cordova Reed, try and get that out right, up front as well. He's also only 5.3 million. So the likes of Welbeck have now got a bit of competition as well. So there's definitely lots of options at Fulham in attack under 6 million. I'm not sure I would still be going anywhere near the defence. I think medium-term fixtures are just not good enough. But if you need a short-term punt, perhaps we can look at them. I'm not ready to say they're a completely different team, but there are some noticeable improvements in certain areas. Let's see if they can carry that on over the next kind of 4 to 6 fixtures. So I wanted to touch on a little bit of double game week plan. I'm not going to really keep talking about double game weeks until we get more information about which other teams are playing in the double game week in 19, and also when they're actually scheduled, so they show on the FPL page, because right now they don't show, so it's probably confusing people a little bit, but there shouldn't be, unless something changes, any more double game weeks until, or any double game weeks until game week 19. So we know West Brom and West Ham are going to have theirs then, and because I mentioned it last week, there's been a few questions about it. Should we plan for it? When's it going to happen, etc. So nothing really more from last week's preview video do we have. We don't have any more info. We could get announced this week, could be next week. We don't know. We're basically waiting for the TV fixtures and for the FA Cup and stuff to get rescheduled. That's what the wait is for. In terms of planning, right, this is a trap that I fall into every year, and I'm really going to try and not do it this year. You can get into a thought process with FPL where you're just thinking about the double game week. So even though we're only just going into game week 13 and we're saying that game week 19 has double game weeks, people are already slowly starting to think about it. And I kind of am too, right? I'm not going to lie and say that part of me going for Souček over Lookman or paying a little bit more for Souček over a 4.5, some of that is knowing that he has a double game week down the line. I'm not sure I would probably go for 3 other West Ham players without a wild card. So he's probably okay to have in my squad. So there is some thinking there. But between now, so you've got game week 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, maybe 18, although you might use your free hit. But at minimum, you've got 5 game weeks to get points from. You don't want to start bringing in players just because they have a double game week. Now, that especially is true for West Brom. Apart from Johnson, I'm not sure you go for any of their players right now anyway. It's a little bit different for West Ham, and this is kind of where you get the perfect storm of a good player in a team that's doing well, with good fixtures, and they have a double game week. And West Ham kind of fall into that bracket. Nothing to say that over the next 4 to 5 game weeks they might fall out of form, they might not be as good options. But right now, if you're thinking about bringing in someone like Bowen, he looks really good for that price, he has good fixtures, and he has a double game week. It's worth noting, if you've got your wildcard still, I wouldn't worry about the double game week at all, because you have to use your first wildcard before it happens, so you can reassess then. So if you've got to use it by game week 16, you're starting to look at punts for 13, 14, 15. You're looking very short term now. But for those of us that don't, it's worth looking at. But right now, we have 6 game weeks until the double game week. That's 50% of the whole season we've had already. There is a lot of points to be earned. Please do not get too stuck on going for double game week players. Of course, as with anything in FPL, it's worth thinking about, it's worth planning for. It's not worth losing points from in between. So I like the looks of Bowen and Antonio when he's fit, and Souček and Sufal and Cresswell. They all look like really good options now and for the next 5-6 weeks. And then they have a double game week, so they're good options. But as we get more announced, don't start rushing to get them into your team, because there are plenty of points up for grabs before that. So yeah, don't panic. We don't really know a whole lot now. I'm not going to keep talking about it until we get more info. For now, just focus on the Christmas period, because that's all that matters. So that's it for this one. Hopefully you found it useful. If you did, please do give it a like and hit that subscribe button if you're new around here. Obviously getting this content out a little bit earlier ahead of the 4:30 deadline on Tuesday. My team selection video came out early this morning. So if you've not already checked that out, make sure you do. I'm hoping to have a captaincy video up again early tomorrow morning. And then I have a deadline stream from 3:30 till 4:30 as well for any last minute questions and stuff. So there won't be another stream in between. There's not going to be a watch list video this week, but hopefully we'll get back to some kind of normal stuff next week. But that's what you got to do when there's quick turnaround. So hopefully you're enjoying all the content. Like I said, if you are, please do give it a like and hit that subscribe button as well. Last thing I want to talk about is Patreon. So if you've not already checked it out, there's a link in the description below. If you want to support me and the channel a little bit further, get some perks along the way, Slack access, WhatsApp access, team reveals and all that good stuff. There'll be a Q&A as well over there before the deadline on Tuesday too. So make sure you check that out. Link in the description below. Everyone that signs up gets on the Legends Wall as well. So big shout out to everyone that is already supporting through there. Really is appreciated. And there you go. I will leave that video there. Again, thanks very much for watching. I'll try and have the captaincy video out tomorrow ahead of the deadline stream at 3:30. And please do remember that the deadline is at 4:30. You don't want to be missing that. And then we go straight into looking ahead to Game Week 14. So this is a fun time of the year. Lots of football, lots of FPL stuff. Hopefully some green arrows. We'll find out in a few days. I'll leave that one there. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you again soon.